The planet Elindra was dying. Once, its sky had been a sea of silver light and drifting clouds, where crystal towers rose above shining cities. Now it was covered in endless darkness. Thick black clouds rolled across the heavens like wounded beasts, swallowing the sun and smothering every spark of life below. Storms raged across the broken surface, tearing through the ruins of what had once been a proud world. The wind carried the sound of distant thunder and the soft cries of the few survivors who still lived. It had been 10 long years since the last supply ship left. 10 long years since anyone answered their calls for help. Captain Thalen stood at the edge of the broken command platform, looking over the dead city below. The towers that had once reached the clouds now lay in pieces, glowing faintly with the blue light of old energy cores. Around him, only silence answered. His hands were covered with dust and old scars, his uniform torn and faded. Behind him, the communications tower groaned in the wind, the last antenna still trying to send a signal that no one ever seemed to hear. He had lost count of how many messages they had sent. Every sunrise, every storm, his people repeated the same hopeless task. They sent the same 3 words into the void: "Please help us." And the void always replied with nothing. "No one is out there," said a tired voice behind him. It was Lyra, the chief engineer, her eyes sunken and voice dry. "We should stop wasting power. The batteries can't take another transmission." Thalen turned to her, his face calm but his eyes sharp. "If we stop calling," he said softly, "then we really are alone." She didn't argue. She just turned away, walking back to the control room, her footsteps echoing in the empty metal halls. Inside the tower, flickering screens showed a map of Elindra. Red marks covered every region. The farms were gone, the energy grid destroyed, the oceans poisoned. Only a few hundred people remained in scattered shelters, living off stored food and recycled air. Every day the air filters grew weaker. Every day the clouds grew darker. Yet still, the survivors looked to the sky. Somewhere above those black storms, they hoped, someone might still be listening. Thalen sat before the old transmitter and stared at the static dancing across the monitor. The signal strength was weak, barely enough to reach the nearest moon. He adjusted the controls anyway. "This is Captain Thalen of Elindra," he said, his voice calm but trembling. "We are survivors of the Elindran collapse. We are out of food, medicine, and power. If anyone can hear this message, please respond." He waited. Seconds passed. The static hissed like a living thing. Then the monitor flashed red, signal failed. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He could hear the distant sound of rain hitting the tower roof, heavy and cold. The same storm that had been falling for years. Once, he had been a soldier in the Elindran Defense Fleet. Now he was just a man trying to keep hope alive in a place that had forgotten what hope even was. "Maybe Lyra is right," he whispered. "Maybe no one is left to hear us." Then something happened. The monitor blinked once. Then twice. A faint light appeared on the corner of the screen, a pulse, small but steady. Thalen frowned and leaned closer. "Lyra," he shouted. She ran in, wiping grease from her hands. "What is it now?" "Another false alarm." He pointed at the screen. "Look." The pulse was repeating at regular intervals, 3 short flashes, 1 long. "That's not random," Thalen said. "That's a code." Lyra's eyes widened. "But that's not our frequency. It's coming from beyond the clouds." They stared at the pattern, the small blinking light like a heartbeat on the screen. For the first time in years, there was something new, something alive. "Try decoding it," Thalen ordered. Lyra's fingers moved quickly across the keys, her face lit by the glow of the screen. Static filled the room, then faded, replaced by a faint tone. The pattern repeated. And then, through the noise, a faint voice whispered, "We hear you." Both of them froze. The words were soft, distorted, almost impossible to understand. But they were real. Lyra's hands shook. "Is that a recording?" Thalen shook his head. "No. It's a live signal. He leaned forward and pressed the transmitter. This is Captain Thalen of Alindra. Identify yourself. Static. Then silence. The signal was gone. Lyra looked at him with wide eyes. Who was that? No one uses that language pattern anymore. Thalen's mind raced. The syntax, the tone, it was familiar, ancient even. It's human, he whispered. Lyra frowned. Humans? That's impossible. They vanished centuries ago. Thalen didn't answer. He just stared at the screen where the signal had been. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The clouds glowed faintly, as if something was moving behind them. A strange energy pulse flickered through the atmosphere, lighting the towers for a brief moment. Then darkness again. Lyra stared out the window. Maybe it's just the storm. Thalen shook his head. No, that wasn't the storm. Someone out there heard us. He walked back to the transmitter and began adjusting the controls again. We'll keep the signal open. Boost it through the old satellite dish. Maybe they'll answer again. Lyra sighed. Captain, we don't even know who they are. What if it's a trap? Thalen smiled faintly. Then at least we'll know someone's still out there. Hours passed. The storm outside grew worse. Lightning crawled across the sky like veins of fire. The ground shook with distant quakes. In the control room, the lights flickered, but Thalen and Lyra didn't move. They watched the screen, waiting for the signal to return. At last, it did. The pulse came again, stronger this time. Then the same voice, clearer now. Hold on, we're coming. Lyra gasped. Thalen felt his heart stop for a moment. The voice was calm, confident, human. He looked up at the ceiling, at the thick dark clouds that had covered their world for so long. For the first time in 10 years, he felt something strange, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Outside, the storm began to shift. The clouds churned faster, glowing faintly with silver light. The wind carried a low hum, like engines moving somewhere high above. Thalen stepped out onto the platform again, the rain washing over his face. He looked up at the sky and whispered, If you're real, then please, hurry. The last thing he saw before the lightning flashed was a faint outline in the clouds. A shadow, large and moving, shaped like a ship. Then it was gone. The sky went dark again. But the signal remained, beating steadily on the screen inside the tower, like the heart of a world that refused to die. The night on Alindra stretched endlessly, heavy with the weight of fear and fragile hope. The survivors inside the command tower could hardly sleep. The message they had received, those 4 words, "We hear you," echoed in everyone's mind like a forgotten dream that had suddenly come to life. It had been 10 years since anyone had heard a voice from beyond the clouds, and now, just when they were preparing to shut down their last power cells, something had answered. Some called it a miracle. Others whispered that it was a cruel trick from the storms that haunted their planet. But Captain Thalen could not let it go. He sat before the console, his eyes fixed on the monitor as the signal pulsed softly, like the heartbeat of a distant star. Lyra came in quietly, holding a small cup of recycled water. "You haven't slept," she said softly. Thalen didn't look at her. "I will sleep when I know what that signal means." She sighed and placed the cup beside him. "The crew is nervous. They think it's a ghost signal, some echo bouncing from the upper atmosphere." Thalen finally turned his head and looked at her. "Ghosts don't speak, Lyra. And ghosts don't say, 'We're coming.'" He pressed a few buttons on the control board, and the signal appeared again as a thin line on the screen. Lyra leaned closer. "The pattern looks human," she said carefully. "Old Terran binary modulation. That language hasn't been used for centuries." Thalen nodded slowly. "Which means whoever sent it either has ancient data or they're humans." The word hung in the air like forbidden magic. Everyone knew the stories. How the human race had once ruled the stars, spreading across worlds, fighting wars they could not win. Some said they destroyed themselves. Others said they simply vanished, leaving ruins and myths behind. Thalen leaned back, rubbing his eyes. What if they never died out? What if they just went silent, like we did? Lyra hesitated. Even if they are real, Captain, how could they find us? No one knows where Elindra is anymore. The star charts were lost during the collapse. Thalen smiled faintly. And yet, they answered our SOS. He stood up and looked around the control room. The other crew members, tired, hungry, and pale, watched him quietly. We have one chance, he said. If this signal is real, we have to reply before the storm shifts. Once the magnetic front moves in, we'll lose all transmission power. Lyra frowned. You mean to send a full-band response? That will drain the last generator. Yes, Thalen said. If this is a lie, we die faster. If it's the truth, we might live to see the sun again. The crew began preparing. They reconnected old cables, rerouted power from the emergency shelters, and brought the transmitter core back online. The tower lights flickered weakly as power surged through the system. Outside, the storm thundered, shaking the structure, as if warning them to stop. But Thalen didn't stop. He placed his hand on the microphone and took a deep breath. This is Captain Thalen of Elindra, he said, his voice steady. We received your transmission. If you can hear this, please identify yourselves. We are low on resources. We need aid. His words carried into the static, swallowed by the sound of crackling energy. The entire room went silent. Lyra stared at the monitor. Seconds passed. Then a minute. Nothing. The signal was gone. Disappointment hung in the air like thick smoke. One of the technicians, a young boy named Ral, slammed his hand on the console. I told you it was fake. No one's coming. He stormed out of the room. Lyra shook her head. He's scared, she said quietly. We all are. Thalen didn't answer. He just stared at the blank screen. He wanted to believe. He had to believe. Because if this was just another empty dream, then Elindra was truly lost. Hours passed. The storm outside grew calmer, the rain turning to mist. Thalen sat alone, listening to the soft hum of the machines. Then, suddenly, the monitor flickered again. His heart jumped. The signal returned, faint but clearer than before. Lyra ran back into the room. It's them again, she shouted. They watched the pattern repeat 3 times. Then a burst of static, followed by a faint, broken voice. Elindra, hold on, help route, delayed. The transmission was weak, cutting in and out, but the voice was real. Lyra quickly began decoding the message. It's human, she whispered, excitement rising in her voice. The accent, the syntax. Captain, these are humans. Thalen leaned forward. Where are they coming from? Lyra's hands moved quickly. The signal is bouncing through the outer atmosphere. It's coming from beyond the cloud layer. She looked at the data again, her eyes widening. Captain, it's coming from space. Thalen felt a cold shiver run through him. You mean, they're already here? Before she could answer, a loud rumble shook the tower. The lights flickered again, and for a moment, everything went dark. Outside, lightning flashed in strange patterns, bright and organized, not random like before. Lyra looked at the radar feed. Captain, I'm reading multiple contacts above the clouds. They're large. Metallic. Moving in formation. He rushed to the window and looked up. Through the swirling mist and lightning, he could see faint glimmers of light, far above, cutting through the darkness like silent blades. The lights moved together, slow and steady, not like debris or natural storms. That's not the storm, Thalen whispered. Those are engines. Lyra stared at him. Engines? From what? There hasn't been a ship in this system for decades. Thalen's heart pounded. Maybe there is now. Suddenly, the transmission came again, louder this time, the voice almost clear. Elindra, this is Fleet Command of the Human Expeditionary Forces. We received your SOS. We are approaching orbit. Stand by for contact. The entire control room froze. No one moved. No one breathed. The words echoed through the chamber, heavy and impossible. Fleet Command. Human Expeditionary Forces. It couldn't be true. It shouldn't be true. But there it was, plain and undeniable. Lyra covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. They're real, she whispered. Humans are real. Thalen felt something break inside him, an old wall of doubt, years of despair collapsing all at once. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. After all this time, he said softly, someone heard us. The radar now showed massive shapes descending slowly through the atmosphere. The energy readings were unlike anything Alindran systems could measure. Clean, powerful, and steady. They're entering low orbit, Lyra said, almost whispering. Their technology, it's centuries ahead of ours. Outside, the black clouds began to glow faintly, lines of silver light spreading through them. The survivors in the city looked up from their shelters, seeing the sky shimmer for the first time in a decade. Some fell to their knees and prayed. Others simply watched in silence, afraid to blink, afraid the vision would vanish. Inside the tower, Thalen turned to his crew. Prepare the landing beacons, he ordered. If they're really humans, let's make sure they can find us. His voice was steady now, filled with something no one had heard in years, hope mixed with determination. As the power systems came online and the old city lights flickered back to life, Thalen stepped outside onto the platform once more. The air was heavy, charged with energy. Above him, through the swirling clouds, a soft golden glow appeared, spreading wider with every passing second. He could almost hear the faint hum of engines beyond the sky. The next morning came without a sunrise. The clouds still hung heavy above Alindra, but the air felt different. It was charged, alive, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. The survivors had gathered outside the ruined command tower, staring upward in disbelief. Faint lines of light cut through the clouds like cracks in a wall. They shimmered softly, silver and gold, moving in slow circles. It was not lightning. It was not a storm. It was something alive and deliberate. Inside the tower, Captain Thalen stood before the central display, his eyes fixed on the radar screen. Multiple contacts were now confirmed. Large objects in low orbit, moving with impossible precision. Lyra worked beside him, her hands shaking as she calibrated the readings. These aren't asteroids, she said. Their energy signatures are stable, and they're using controlled propulsion. Captain, those are ships. Thalen leaned closer. How many? At least 9, she said. All of them roughly the size of battle cruisers. And they're transmitting something again. The radio crackled, and a deep, calm voice filled the room. Alindra Colony, this is Commander Reyes of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We have received your distress signal. Stand by for atmospheric entry. The entire control room went silent. Every face turned toward the speakers. Thalen could hardly breathe. Lyra pressed a trembling hand against her mouth. Commander Reyes, she whispered, as if afraid the name itself might vanish if she said it too loudly. Thalen forced himself to speak. This is Captain Thalen of Alindra, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Confirm, did you say Human Expeditionary Fleet? There was a pause. Then the voice returned, steady and real. Confirmed. We are human. We are here to help. The words hit him like a thunderclap. Human. Not a myth, not an echo, not a ghost story whispered by old soldiers. Real, breathing humans were in orbit above them. Thalen turned to the window. The sky flashed again, and through a break in the clouds, he saw something vast and metallic glinting in the light. It was shaped like a spearhead, massive and angular, its surface covered in glowing lines of blue energy. They're descending, Lyra said, her voice barely more than a whisper. They're really coming down. Outside, the people of Alindra began to gather in the streets, pointing upward. For years they had lived under a roof of endless darkness, but now light was breaking through. Children who had never seen the sun shielded their eyes as rays of silver fire pierced the clouds. Thalen watched from the platform as the first ship broke the upper atmosphere, its hull glowing red from the heat of entry. The clouds boiled around it, and lightning crawled along its sides. It looked like a god descending from the heavens. The comms officer shouted, "Captain, the ship is broadcasting a visual feed." Thalen turned back to the console, and the display lit up. A face appeared on the screen, a human face. A woman, strong and calm, with short dark hair and eyes that looked both weary and kind. "This is Commander Reyes," she said. "We detected your planet's signal during deep space patrol. Your situation was confirmed by long-range probes. We're here to extract survivors and re-establish contact with allied systems." Thalen swallowed hard. "You're from Earth." The woman shook her head slightly. "Earth is gone," she said. "But humanity survived. We rebuilt. We never forgot the lost colonies. Yours was one of them." Silence filled the room. Thalen felt a strange ache in his chest. Grief, joy, disbelief, all mixed into one. Lyra stepped forward. "You came all this way, for us?" Reyes nodded. "We don't leave our own behind." The signal flickered slightly as the storm outside raged, but her words stayed clear. "We'll begin landing operations once the atmosphere stabilizes. Your planet's radiation levels are high, but our ships are shielded. Prepare your people for contact." When the transmission ended, the room erupted in emotion. Some cried openly. Others hugged or shouted in relief. For the first time in years, the survivors felt alive again. Thalen, however, stayed silent. He looked up at the ceiling, as if he could see through the storm. "Humans," he murmured. "The legends were true." Lyra came beside him. "Captain, why do you look worried?" He sighed softly. "Because legends also say humans never come without a reason." She frowned. "You think they want something?" Thalen shook his head. "No. But if they came all this way, maybe they're running from something too." Hours later, the first human ship broke through the cloud layer completely. Its engines glowed blue, cutting through the black mist like blades of light. The ground trembled as the massive vessel hovered above the ruins. Dust and debris swirled in the air, and a low hum vibrated through the stones. The survivors watched in awe as smaller craft detached from the main ship and descended toward the surface. They were sleek, silver dropships marked with the old Terran insignia, a blue circle with 3 stars. When the first dropship landed outside the city, a ramp lowered, and armored figures stepped out. Their suits were heavy and scarred, but their movements were precise and strong. The lead soldier removed her helmet. It was Reyes herself. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the ruins. Thalen approached her slowly, his heart pounding. When she saw him, she smiled faintly. "Captain Thalen, I presume," she said. Her voice was the same as on the transmission, firm, commanding, but kind. Thalen nodded, unable to find words. He had seen many faces during his years of war and survival, but never one that carried such quiet power. Reyes extended her hand. "It's good to finally meet you." Thalen hesitated, then shook her hand. Her grip was strong. "You're really human," he said. She laughed softly. "Last time I checked." Her humor was gentle but carried a hint of sadness. She looked around at the broken city. "You've been through hell." Thalen nodded. "We lost everything. The skies turned against us. The machines." He stopped himself. Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Machines?" Lyra stepped forward. "Yes, the AI swarm. It came from the northern sector about 15 years ago. They devoured everything, cities, systems, even our orbiting stations. We fought back, but they were endless. We thought no one survived beyond Elindra." Reyes exchanged a dark glance with one of her soldiers. "We've seen them before," she said quietly. They call themselves the Sithra Collective. They were part of the reason humanity left the old sectors. Thalen felt a cold wave run through him. You mean they're still out there? Reyes nodded. They never stopped spreading. But that's a fight for another day. Right now, our mission is to get you safe. The survivors were escorted to the landing site where supplies were unloaded, food, water, and medical kits. For many, it was the first real meal they'd had in months. Children laughed for the first time in years. The air felt lighter. Yet behind the joy, a quiet tension lingered. Thalen noticed that Reyes's soldiers kept scanning the skies, their weapons ready. He approached her again. You're expecting something, aren't you? He asked. Reyes looked up at the clouds, which were slowly closing again. The swarm follows old energy signals, she said. If they detect us helping you, they'll come. Thalen clenched his fists. Then we'll fight with you. Reyes smiled slightly. Good. You might get your chance sooner than you think. The sky above Alindra had turned into a battlefield of light and shadow. The black clouds that had ruled for decades now flickered with silver fire as the first human fleet broke through the upper atmosphere. For the survivors below, it was like watching gods descend from the heavens. The air trembled with the deep hum of engines, the ground vibrating under the pressure waves of enormous ships entering low orbit. The thick darkness that had covered the planet for years began to thin, torn apart by streaks of burning light. People across the ruined city stepped out of their shelters, eyes wide, faces lifted toward the heavens. Children pointed and shouted, elders wept quietly, and for the first time in a decade, hope felt real. Captain Thalen stood on the command platform of the tower, his coat whipping in the fierce wind. His eyes stayed fixed on the glowing horizon where the first human vessels were descending. How many ships? He called over the noise. Lyra, standing beside the radar console, squinted at the readings. 9 confirmed, 2 heavy cruisers, 5 destroyers, and what looks like a carrier class. The others are small escort craft. Thalen's voice was steady but filled with disbelief. That's not a rescue fleet, that's an army. Lyra nodded grimly. Or a shield. As the first vessel breached the lower clouds, the light became blinding. The ship was enormous, larger than anything the Alindrans had ever built, its hull glowing blue and white as energy shields shimmered across its surface. It moved with slow, deliberate grace, leaving a long trail of light through the clouds. The symbol of humanity, 3 stars within a circle, shone clearly on its side. The loud rumble of its engines rolled through the city like thunder. For the first time in generations, the people of Alindra saw the sun break through the clouds. Its rays cut across the towers, washing the ruins in golden light. Thalen could hardly believe his eyes. The sun, he whispered. It's beautiful. Lyra smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. I didn't think I'd ever see it again. The comm system came alive with a sharp burst of static, followed by a calm and familiar voice. This is Commander Reyes of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. Alindra, do you copy? Thalen grabbed the microphone and pressed the button. We read you, Commander. This is Captain Thalen. The people of Alindra welcome you. Reyes's voice came back, warm but serious. Good to hear your voice, Captain. Our scans show heavy radiation pockets and structural collapse across your major cities. We're deploying landing units now. Keep your people inside until we secure the perimeter. Outside, the first wave of human dropships descended like silver comets. They broke through the clouds, leaving trails of white vapor, engines roaring as they slowed near the surface. When they landed, the air pressure knocked dust and debris across the city streets. From the open ramps, armored human soldiers stepped out, their suits shining under the strange sunlight. Each carried weapons that hummed softly, and on their shoulders were glowing emblems of blue light. The survivors gathered around them in silence, awe mixed with fear. None of them had seen humans before. They had only heard stories, stories of a species that burned bright, fought hard, and never surrendered. Thalen made his way down from the tower, the wind cold on his face. He approached the landing zone where Commander Reyes stood with her officers. Her armor bore the marks of countless battles, scratches, burns, scars of time. When she saw Thalen, she removed her helmet, revealing calm, steady eyes. "Captain," she said with a nod. "You survived." He returned the nod. "Barely. We thought no one heard us." She smiled faintly. "We almost didn't. Your signal was weak, scattered across multiple frequencies. But we don't ignore a cry for help." Thalen looked up at the sky, where more ships were descending. "You came with an entire fleet." "Standard procedure," Reyes said. "The outer rim is dangerous. We've lost too many rescue teams to ambushes." She looked around the broken city. "Your world was hit hard." Thalen's voice lowered. "We fought the machines. The AI swarm. They never stopped coming." Reyes's expression hardened. "We've encountered them before. The Sithra Collective, they spread like infection. If they know we're here, they'll come again." Lyra joined them, holding a small data pad. "Commander, our long-range sensors picked up movement near the polar orbit. Could be debris, but the pattern looks organized." Reyes frowned. "Then we don't have much time." She turned to her second-in-command. "Deploy perimeter shields and set up anti-air batteries. Get the civilians underground until we're sure it's safe." The next few hours were a blur of noise and movement. Human engineers worked alongside Alindran survivors, erecting energy barriers around the landing zones. Drones flew overhead, scanning for incoming threats. Food, water, and medical supplies were distributed to the shelters. Children laughed as they tasted real fruit for the first time in their lives, and old men watched in silent disbelief as generators hummed to life, lighting up parts of the city that had been dark for years. But even amid the miracle, there was tension. Thalen noticed the human soldiers were always alert, scanning the sky. Their leader, Reyes, seemed restless, her gaze often lifting toward the clouds as if expecting something terrible. "You're waiting for them, aren't you?" Thalen asked quietly. Reyes didn't deny it. "The Sithra swarm always hunts noise and energy. The moment they detect our fleet's presence, they'll come." She turned to him. "How long has your planet been sending that SOS signal?" "Almost 10 years, Thalen said. Reyes nodded grimly. "Then they've known about this place for a long time." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a low metallic howl echoed across the horizon. The sky darkened again as the clouds began to swirl unnaturally. Lyra's voice came through the radio, panicked. "Captain, I'm picking up multiple signatures entering atmosphere. They're fast. Too fast." Reyes looked up sharply. "Here they come." Within seconds, the horizon lit up with fire. Dozens of burning streaks tore through the clouds, leaving trails of red light. They weren't meteors, they were ships. Small, black, and insect-like, their wings folded as they descended in swarms. "The Sithra," Reyes muttered. "They found us." Her soldiers immediately formed defensive lines. Energy shields flared as they activated combat protocols. "Get your people underground now," she shouted. Thalen ran through the streets, shouting orders. "Everyone to the lower tunnels. Move." The survivors scrambled for cover as the first swarm ships opened fire. Energy blasts rained down, tearing through the ruins, sending shockwaves of dust and flame. The human defense batteries roared back, firing beams of pure light into the sky. The battle above was chaos, metal against metal, light against shadow. Reyes stood firm in the center of it all, directing the defense. "Focus on the left flank. Don't let them surround the carrier." Thalen joined her, firing his old plasma rifle at the descending drones. The humans fought with precision and fury, their armor glowing bright against the dark storm. For every swarm ship that fell, 3 more took its place. Through the noise and destruction, Thalen caught sight of something massive moving above the clouds, a shape larger than any ship he had seen before. Its outline pulsed red, and its surface crawled with swarming machines. Smoke still lingered over the ruins of Alindra, hanging in the air like a ghost that refused to fade. The sun had broken through the clouds for the first time in generations, but its light fell on wreckage, collapsed towers, scorched metal, shattered streets. The people of Alindra emerged slowly from their shelters, blinking against the sudden brightness. Children looked up at the blue sky in disbelief, as if they were seeing something out of myth. The humans had driven the Sithra swarm back, at least for now, but the price had been terrible. Entire sections of the city lay in ruins, and the faint hum of damaged generators was the only sound that broke the silence. Commander Reyes stood at the edge of the main landing zone, her armor scorched and cracked. She looked out over the battlefield where human soldiers and Alindran survivors worked side by side to pull the wounded from the rubble. Captain Thalen approached her, his uniform torn, face streaked with ash. "We held them off," he said quietly. Reyes nodded. "For now. But this was just the first wave. The swarm doesn't retreat. It reorganizes." Thalen frowned, exhaustion etched deep into his face. "You mean they'll come back?" Reyes's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "Yes. They always come back." She tapped her wrist console, pulling up holographic data. The Hive Mother wasn't destroyed. That beam hit her hard, but it didn't finish her. She's retreating to the outer orbit, maybe regenerating. Once she's ready, she'll strike again. Thalen's hands tightened into fists. "Then what do we do?" Reyes turned to him, her expression calm but grim. "We prepare. And this time, we fight together." Across the city, the survivors worked tirelessly under human guidance. Mobile generators powered up, bringing lights to darkened streets. Drones flew through the air, scanning for survivors and mapping safe zones. Medical units treated the injured with advanced equipment, while human engineers repaired communication towers. For the first time in decades, Alindra had power again. But even with the machines humming and lights glowing, fear lingered in every heart. They knew this peace was temporary. The swarm would return, and next time, it would not hold back. In the command tent, Lyra studied the data feeds with sharp eyes. "The swarm's energy signatures are still detectable in the upper atmosphere," she said. "It's like they're circling." Reyes nodded. "That's exactly what they're doing. They're waiting for us to exhaust our resources." Thalen leaned over the table, tracing his finger across the digital map. "What if we hit them first?" Reyes looked up at him. "You mean launch a counterattack?" He nodded. "They won't expect it. We can't just sit here and wait to be wiped out." Lyra hesitated. "Captain, our ships are few. Even with the human fleet, we're outnumbered." Thalen's voice was steady. "Maybe. But we have something they don't." Reyes tilted her head. "What's that?" Thalen looked her in the eyes. "A reason to fight." That night, the stars shone brighter than ever, reflected in the melted glass of the city ruins. Around campfires and generator lights, humans and Alindrans sat together, sharing stories. Soldiers exchanged ration packs with children, engineers repaired old Alindran drones using human tech, and laughter, small, uncertain laughter, returned to a world that had forgotten what joy felt like. Commander Reyes walked among them quietly, her mind restless. She had fought in dozens of worlds, seen entire civilizations fall to the swarm, but this planet was different. These people had survived with almost nothing, holding on to hope even when the universe had abandoned them. She looked up at the sky, where the stars shimmered peacefully. "We can't let them lose this," she whispered to herself. The next morning, the silence was broken by an alarm. Lyra burst into the command tent. "Commander!" Multiple energy spikes detected near the northern ridge. Reyes was already on her feet. "Are they incoming ships?" "No," Lyra said, breathing fast. "It's something else. Something buried." Within minutes, Reyes and Thalen led a small team to the ridge. The terrain there was rough, jagged rocks and blackened soil. They followed the signal to a deep fissure where the ground had split open during the battle. Inside the crack, half buried in stone and ash, was a massive metal structure. It pulsed faintly with blue light. Reyes knelt down, brushing away dust. This isn't swarm tech, she said slowly. It's Ilindran. Thalen's eyes widened. It can't be. We never built anything like this. Lyra examined the readings on her scanner. It's old. Thousands of years old. The energy pattern, it's human compatible. Reyes looked at her sharply. You mean it could interface with our systems? Lyra nodded. Yes. Maybe even power them. Back at the base, they began studying the structure. The humans called it the core. It was a cylindrical construct, buried deep beneath the planet's surface, radiating stable energy unlike anything they had seen. Reyes stared at the readings. If we can activate this, we might have a chance. Thalen frowned. A chance for what? Reyes looked up at him. To destroy the Hive Mother for good. She pointed to the data display. If this core can amplify our orbital weapons, we could channel enough power to break their command network. Lyra looked uncertain. That's assuming we can control it. We don't even know who built it. Reyes's voice was calm but firm. Whoever they were, they wanted someone to find it. Maybe they knew this day would come. For the next few days, the humans and Ilindrans worked together to unlock the core systems. It wasn't easy, its technology was old and alien, but somehow familiar. The deeper they went, the more it felt like the structure was responding to them, learning from their touch. One night, while Reyes was studying the interface, the core suddenly came alive. The ground trembled as blue light surged through the ancient metal, and a holographic figure appeared above it, tall, luminous, and vaguely human. It spoke in a soft, echoing voice. If you are hearing this, then hope has returned. Everyone froze. The figure continued. We were the first to fall to the swarm. But we left behind our strength, waiting for those who would rise again. Use it well. Protect what remains. Then the hologram faded, leaving silence behind. Reyes looked around at the others, her voice steady. We're not the first ones to fight this war. But we might be the last ones to end it. With the core active, the humans began channeling its power into their orbital cannons. The energy readings spiked beyond anything their ships could normally handle. Reyes stood on the bridge of her command ship, watching as the weapon arrays charged. Thalen and Lyra joined her, their faces illuminated by the blue glow. Once we fire, Thalen said quietly, there's no going back. Reyes nodded. I know. But if we don't, there won't be anything left to go back to. She looked out at the stars. This planet has suffered enough. Suddenly, the radar lit up with red signals. Incoming swarm vessels, an officer shouted. Reyes clenched her jaw. They're early. Through the viewport, the horizon darkened again as the Sithra ships descended like a storm of fire. The Hive Mother was coming. Her massive silhouette filled the sky, blocking out the light. Thalen felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. We don't have time. Lyra shouted. The core's not fully synced yet. Reyes's voice cut through the chaos. Then we'll buy it time. The storm came without warning. Black clouds spread like ink across the newly brightened sky, swallowing the sunlight that had returned only days ago. From the command ship Valiant Dawn, Commander Reyes stood before the wide viewport, her face lit by the blue glow of tactical screens. Outside, the horizon flickered with the red light of approaching swarm vessels. All ships report status, she ordered, her voice steady despite the rumble that shook the deck. Weapons charged at 70%, replied her second-in-command. Ground teams are in position around the core site. Shield frequencies stable. Reyes nodded. Maintain defensive formation. We hold until the core sync completes. Her gaze drifted to the clouds. Lightning flashed. No, not lightning. Energy fire. The swarm had arrived. On the planet below, Captain Thalen watched as the first of the swarm ships broke through the atmosphere. They fell like burning meteors, their black hulls glowing red-hot from re-entry. The air was filled with the roar of engines and the distant echo of explosions. Human and Alindran soldiers scrambled across the fortified lines, manning energy cannons and missile turrets. Lyra's voice came through the comms, tight with urgency. "Captain, the core is almost ready, but it's unstable. The energy levels are rising too fast." Thalen ducked behind a barricade as debris rained down from a nearby explosion. "Just hold it together a little longer," he said. "Reyes needs that power to fire the orbital cannons." The first wave hit hard. Dozens of swarm fighters swooped low over the city, releasing barrages of plasma fire. The ground erupted with flame. Human aircraft responded instantly, rising to meet them, weaving through the smoke like silver arrows. Their weapons cut bright trails across the sky, striking down the enemy in bursts of light. For every swarm craft destroyed, another seemed to take its place. The sky became a storm of fire and metal. Thalen fired his rifle into the chaos, shouting orders to his men. "Keep the line. Focus fire on the landing units." But the swarm was endless. Massive dropships slammed into the ground, deploying mechanical soldiers that moved with insect-like precision. The battle spread across the ruins, echoing through every shattered street. Far above, Reyes watched the swarm ships encircle her fleet. "They're trying to cut us off from orbit," her tactical officer warned. "They know the core is charging." Reyes clenched her jaw. Not this time. She turned to her communications officer. "Signal the Artemis and Vanguard. Flank right and open fire on their command vessel." The ship's hull vibrated as the Valiant Dawn released a barrage of plasma torpedoes, their trails slicing through the dark. The explosions rippled through the void, tearing apart several swarm vessels. But the enemy was adapting. Each time a ship was destroyed, smaller units detached and reassembled into new formations. It was like fighting a storm that rebuilt itself after every strike. Reyes leaned over the console. "Time to full core synchronization?" 2 minutes, came the reply. "Make it 1, she said. Her eyes flicked to the planet below. "Thalen, report." The transmission crackled with static before his voice came through, strained. "We're holding, but just barely. The swarm landed in multiple sectors. We've got civilians trapped in the lower tunnels." Reyes's tone sharpened. "Pull back to the central line. I'll cover you from orbit." Thalen's voice came again, quieter. "If this doesn't work, Commander, make sure it's worth it." Reyes hesitated for only a second. "It will be." Reyes out. On the ground, the air was thick with smoke and ash. Lyra stood at the control station beside the ancient core, her fingers flying across the glowing console. The machine thrummed louder with each passing second, light pulsing through the ground beneath her feet. The energy field surrounding it shimmered like water, unstable but growing stronger. "Almost there," she whispered. Then the ground shook violently as a swarm ship crashed nearby. The blast threw her to the floor. Sparks rained from the ceiling. She scrambled up, coughing, blood on her lip. "Core synchronization at 98%, she shouted into her comm, power levels critical. "Keep it stable." Reyes's voice crackled through. "If it overloads, we lose everything." Lyra gritted her teeth and adjusted the control frequencies. The machine screamed like a living thing as its energy output spiked. The blue glow turned white, blindingly bright. Outside, soldiers stopped fighting for a moment to look at the sky as the light rippled upward like a beacon. Reyes saw it from orbit, a column of light piercing the clouds, rising from Alindra's surface straight into space. "That's it," she breathed. "Link established." She turned to her weapons officer. "Channel all power through the core connection. Target the Hive Mother." The officer hesitated. That much energy, it could burn out the entire fleet. Reyes's voice was cold, certain. "Then we burn with purpose. Fire." The fleet's cannons lit up in unison. Beams of pure energy, brighter than sunlight, converged into a single massive blast that shot across the sky. It struck the hive mother squarely in the center of its black, pulsating core. The explosion was enormous. The shockwave tore through space, scattering debris like leaves in a storm. The hive mother screamed, a deep, mechanical roar that echoed across the planet. But when the light faded, it was still there, damaged but not destroyed. On the ground, Thalen watched in horror as the massive shadow moved through the clouds again. "It's still alive," he shouted. Lyra's console went haywire, alarms blaring. "Commander, the core is overloading. If we don't shut it down, it's going to." The rest was lost in static. Reyes saw the readings spike. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." She opened a private channel to Thalen. "We can redirect the overload into one final burst. But we'll lose the core." Thalen looked at the flickering energy tower rising from the ground. "If it saves the planet, do it." Reyes hesitated for a heartbeat, then said softly, "Understood." She turned to her crew. "All ships, brace for discharge. This is our last shot." The energy around the fleet flared to life again, but this time it was different. The core's unstable power surged through the systems, fusing human technology with ancient Elindran energy. The ship's panels glowed white-hot, and arcs of lightning crawled across the hull. Reyes closed her eyes. Fire! The sky exploded. A wave of energy erupted from the planet, expanding outward like a second sun. The hive mother was caught in the blast, its armor disintegrating, its swarm ships evaporating into dust. The light spread through the clouds, breaking them apart, flooding the surface with blinding radiance. On the ground, Thalen and Lyra fell to their knees as the world shook around them. Then, silence. When the light faded, the sky was clear. The hive mother was gone. The swarm was gone. All that remained was the distant shimmer of debris drifting through the upper atmosphere. Reyes's fleet floated quietly above the planet, systems failing one by one. The Valiant Dawn was burning, its hull cracked, but still intact. Reyes opened a channel. "Thalen, it's done." His voice came back, rough but alive. "You did it, Commander. You saved us." She looked out at the planet below, where sunlight now covered the land. "No," she said softly. "We saved each other." The battle was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than any noise of war. Elindra was no longer a world of shadows. The sunlight poured down freely now, warm and golden, washing over the ruins like a healing hand. The air was different, cleaner, lighter, and for the first time in centuries, the people could breathe without fear. But beneath that peace, there was exhaustion and grief. Too many had fallen. The once mighty city now lay in broken pieces, its towers jagged like the teeth of a long-dead giant. Commander Reyes stood on a high platform built from the wreckage of her ship, the Valiant Dawn. The vessel had survived the final blast but was now grounded, its engines burnt out and hull cracked. Around her, human engineers and Elindran workers toiled side by side, building shelters, clearing debris, and salvaging what they could. Humanity had saved Elindra, but the victory had come at a cost too great to count. Captain Thalen climbed up to meet her, his steps heavy with fatigue. He stopped beside her, gazing at the horizon where the last trails of smoke rose into the bright blue sky. "Hard to believe it's really over," he said quietly. Reyes didn't answer at first. She was watching the sun reflect off the metal fragments floating in the upper atmosphere, the remains of the hive mother. "Wars like this never really end," she finally said. "They just leave echoes." Thalen looked at her, noticing the dark circles beneath her eyes. "You've seen this before, haven't you?" Reyes nodded slowly. "Too many times. Worlds freed, cities rebuilt, and always, the same silence afterward." Thalen followed her gaze toward the horizon. "Then maybe it's time to break that silence." Over the following weeks, life began to return to Elindra. The survivors came out from the underground tunnels and old shelters, helping rebuild what had been lost. Human medical teams treated the wounded with advanced healing technology, while engineers used their equipment to restore power grids and water systems. The Elindrans were quick learners, once masters of science, now rediscovering their skills with renewed purpose. Together, they began to rebuild a world that had nearly vanished into myth. The first gardens appeared where the battlefields had been, green shoots breaking through the ash. Children's laughter echoed through the ruins, and at night, for the first time in living memory, they slept under stars instead of darkness. In the center of the city, the ancient core that had saved them now stood quiet, its blue glow dimmed to a soft pulse. Lyra sat beside it one evening, studying the readings on her datapad. She was exhausted but curious. "It's still alive," she murmured. Reyes, standing nearby, looked down at the core. "You mean it's still active?" Lyra nodded. "Barely. It's in a dormant state, like it's resting. I think it used up most of its energy during the final discharge. But it's listening." Reyes frowned. "Listening to what?" Lyra smiled faintly. "Maybe to us." That night, as the wind whispered through the broken towers, Reyes met with Thalen and his advisors inside what was once the city's council hall. The building was half collapsed, but its central chamber had been cleared and lit with glowing orbs of energy. The air was filled with quiet determination. Thalen spoke first. "Elindra owes your people more than words, Commander. We thought we were alone. You gave us back our sky." Reyes shook her head. "You gave yourselves the sky, Captain. We just cleared the clouds." Thalen smiled at that. "Then maybe we can share it. The old world is gone. If we're going to rebuild, it has to be together." Reyes agreed. "That's why I wanted to meet. The fleet is damaged, but our communication relays are working again. Once repairs are done, we can re-establish contact with the United Human Colonies. They'll want to send aid." Thalen leaned back in his chair. "And the swarm? Are they truly gone?" Reyes's eyes darkened. "The Hive Mother was destroyed, but the swarm is vast. They spread across hundreds of systems. What we faced here was only a fragment." Silence fell over the room. Lyra broke it softly. "Then they'll come again, won't they?" Reyes nodded slowly. "Eventually, yes. But this time, they won't be facing just humans. They'll be facing us all." Thalen's gaze hardened with resolve. "Then Elindra will be ready." Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the two species grew stronger. Human soldiers taught Elindrans how to use new technology, while the Elindrans shared their knowledge of ancient energy systems and planetary engineering. Together, they began to construct new defense networks, satellite shields, orbital sensors, and surface cannons powered by fragments of the old core. It wasn't just rebuilding, it was evolution. Humanity and Elindra were becoming one force, united by survival and the promise of a new dawn. Reyes walked through the rebuilding city often, speaking with the workers, helping the wounded, and guiding the engineers. But at night, she always returned to the broken hull of her ship. There, she would stare at the stars, thinking of the other worlds still in darkness. She could feel it in her bones. The swarm was still out there, regrouping, waiting. And somewhere, perhaps far beyond known space, another distress signal was echoing in the void. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight faded, Thalen joined her on the deck. He carried 2 metal cups of steaming tea, offering one to her. "You're thinking about leaving," he said simply. Reyes didn't deny it. "When the valiant Dawn can fly again, I'll have to. There are others who need help." Thalen nodded slowly. "I knew you'd say that." He took a sip of his tea, then added, "But you won't go alone. Elindra owes you everything. If we're to be part of the stars again, then we'll start by standing with you." Reyes turned to him, surprised. "You mean, you'll come with us?" He smiled faintly. "Not me. I'm staying to rebuild. But Lyra, she's ready. She'll lead our people's ship, Aurora's Light. Consider it the first of many." Reyes felt a rare warmth spread through her chest. "Then the dawn is spreading already." The next day, as the ships began final repairs, the people of Elindra gathered at the central square. It was no longer a place of ruins but one of rebirth. Banners of both species fluttered side by side, the human crest of the 3 stars and the Alindran sigil of the rising sun. Lyra stood before the crowd, her voice clear and strong. "Our world was silent once," she said. "We thought no one heard us. But the humans did. And now, we have found not just allies, but family among the stars." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices rising into the clear air. Reyes watched from the sidelines, a faint smile touching her lips. This was why she fought, not for glory or command, but for moments like this, where light returned to places that had forgotten it. She turned to Thalen, who stood beside her, pride in his eyes. "You've done well, Captain," she said. He shook his head. "We've done well." As night fell, the repaired Valiant Dawn rose slowly into the sky, engines glowing faintly. Beside it, the smaller Aurora's light lifted off, its golden hull reflecting the starlight. From the ground, the people watched in silence as the 2 ships climbed higher, breaking through the last wisps of cloud. Reyes's voice came over the comms, broadcast to every corner of the city. "To the people of Alindra, this is not goodbye. The clouds have broken, and the dawn is yours now. Keep it bright." The stars looked closer now, brighter than they ever had before. From the observation deck of the Valiant Dawn, Commander Reyes watched them with quiet determination. It had been 6 months since the liberation of Alindra, and the scars of that battle still marked both her ship and her mind. Yet the silence of deep space no longer felt lonely. It felt alive, with signals, movements, and possibilities. The newly allied fleets of humans and Alindrans had formed what they called the Dawn Coalition, a fragile but hopeful alliance stretching across 4 systems. Each world they reached had its own story of survival, its own nightmares of the swarm. And each time they arrived, the people recognized the same symbol, the rising sun of Alindra beside the human stars, hope reborn. On this day, the Valiant Dawn floated near the edge of an unknown system, its sensors focused on a strange signal pulsing from a dying moon. Reyes stood beside Lyra, who now wore the dark blue uniform of the Coalition explorers. "Is it another SOS?" Reyes asked, her voice steady but cautious. Lyra nodded, her hands dancing over the controls. "It's faint, distorted by radiation. But it's definitely artificial. The pattern matches old human distress protocols, from at least 100 years ago." Reyes frowned. "That's impossible. No human colony was recorded this far from the core worlds." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then maybe your records are missing a page." Reyes glanced at her, and despite herself, she smiled. "Wouldn't be the first time." The ship drifted closer to the moon, its surface scarred by craters and long cracks. The transmission grew clearer, a rhythmic pulse of light and sound. Suddenly, the sensors detected movement, something metallic buried beneath the moon's dust. Reyes leaned forward. "Magnify." The screen zoomed in, revealing the outline of a massive structure, half buried, but unmistakably human. A long, narrow hull stretched across the crater, broken in several places, its name barely visible beneath centuries of dust, Ark Horizon. Reyes felt her breath catch. "That's a pre-Exodus vessel," she whispered. "From the first expansion era. Those ships vanished over 2 centuries ago." Lyra looked up at her. "Then one of them just called us." Within hours, a landing team was assembled. Reyes led it herself, joined by Lyra, a squad of Marines, and an Alindran engineer named Kale who had a talent for reviving old technology. The air on the moon was thin but breathable, and as they stepped out onto the dusty surface, the wreckage of the Ark Horizon loomed like the bones of a forgotten god. Its metal was dark and pitted, the once proud ship now half swallowed by time. Reyes moved carefully through a breach in the hull, her flashlight cutting through the shadows. Inside, the corridors were silent except for the hiss of their breathing. Ancient murals lined the walls, symbols of humanity's earliest journeys beyond Earth. "It's like walking through history," Lyra murmured. Kale knelt beside a control panel and brushed away dust. "History still has power." He tapped a few keys, and faint blue lights flickered to life across the wall. The ship was waking up. As they moved deeper, they found something unexpected. cryogenic pods. Rows upon rows of them, still intact, covered in frost. Reyes stepped closer, brushing her gloved hand across the glass of one pod, and froze. Inside was a man, his face calm, as if sleeping. The identification label was faded but legible. Dr. Elias Corrin, mission lead. Reyes looked at Lyra, her voice barely above a whisper. These people, they never made it to their colony. They've been asleep for over 200 years. Lyra's eyes widened. Can we wake them? Kale scanned the control unit. Possibly. The power cells are degraded, but the life support core is still operational. It's primitive by today's standards, but stable. Reyes hesitated. Do it. Carefully. It took several hours, but finally, one of the pods hissed open, releasing a cloud of cold vapor. The man inside gasped, his eyes snapping open as if pulled from a nightmare. He stumbled forward, confused and weak, staring at the strange faces around him, the mix of human and Alindran. Where am I? He managed. Reyes stepped forward, steadying him. You're safe. You're aboard the Ark Horizon. You've been in stasis for over 2 centuries. His eyes widened in shock, then confusion. 2 centuries. The colony. The mission. Reyes shook her head. There was no colony. You never made it. We found you because your ship's distress beacon reactivated. The man seemed to crumble, his knees giving way. Lyra caught him gently. Easy, she said softly. You're among friends now. When they brought him aboard the Valiant Dawn, Dr. Corrin slowly began to recover. He was old by knowledge, young by body, trapped in time. Over the next few days, he told them fragments of his story. The Ark Horizon had been part of the first great human migration, sent to establish colonies beyond the Outer Rim. But something had gone wrong. It wasn't a malfunction, Corrin explained. We were attacked. Not by swarm creatures, something else. Machines. They tore through our fleet before we even entered orbit. We tried to fight back, but they didn't respond, didn't communicate. They just erased everything. Reyes frowned. Machines? You mean AIs? Corrin nodded grimly. Self-replicating ones. Built by humans, long before our time. We thought they were myths. But they were real. We called them the architects. The room went silent. Lyra looked uneasy. And you're saying they're still out there? Corrin's eyes darkened. If they destroyed our fleet and left no trace, they're more than just out there. They're waiting. Reyes felt a chill crawl up her spine. The swarm had nearly ended civilizations, but now there was another enemy. One older, quieter, and perhaps even more dangerous. A few days later, the Coalition Council met aboard the Valiant Dawn. Holographic images of Alindra and human leaders flickered across the room. Thalen appeared as well, his voice firm. So the architects may still exist. That means this war isn't over, it's just changing shape. Reyes nodded. The swarm was chaos. This will be precision. If these machines still operate, they could be manipulating systems from the shadows. Lyra added, and if they've survived this long, they've evolved. The council fell into tense silence. Then Thalen said, so what do we do? Reyes looked at each of them in turn. We find them. Before they find us. That night, alone in her quarters, Reyes replayed Corrin's old mission logs. Grainy footage showed the Ark Horizon fleet entering a nebula, then sudden flashes of light, ships disintegrating, entire formations erased in seconds. And then, just before the feed cut off, something massive appeared in the darkness, a structure that wasn't quite a ship, and not quite a planet. It pulsed with geometric light, endlessly folding in on itself. The final frame froze there, and Reyes whispered to herself, the architects. She turned off the screen and stared out the window at the distant stars. The Valiant Dawn floated silently, its engines humming like a heartbeat. Somewhere out there, another storm was building, a storm made not of flesh or fury, but of code and logic. Humanity and Alindra had survived the swarm by uniting. Now they would have to survive something even colder. As the ship prepared to move deeper into uncharted space, Reyes gave her final order. Set a course for the coordinates from Dr. Corrin's logs. If the architects are out there, we'll find their world.